Hey, thanks for making it to Veterans Daily with Jay and Clay. We are glad you made it. It is it's a pot of stew, and I don't know what's in it anymore. There's so many changes that are happening so rapidly, and we're going to dive into it. Clay has meticulously picked out a few ingredients to talk about, and I'm actually, to be honest with you, I'm pretty excited about the topics because they're all equally irritating. And so, with that, please hit the thumbs up, subscribe, share with a friend, all that good stuff. We really appreciate every single one of you helping our joint channel grow. If you are new to the channel, thank you for making it Veterans Daily with Jay and Clay. Clay has his own channel, which is great, and that is the CivDiv. And then I have Veterans Infotep. So please subscribe there if you're not as well. Whatever. Anyway, here you go. Back to you, Clay. Let's or to you the first time, Clay. Let's talk about these special ingredients that you picked down of this sloppy stew.
Yeah, so today we're going to start off with everyone's favorite topic, which is fraud. And when it comes to VA benefits, yes, this is real. If you subscribe to the VA OIG reports, you will see how frequent the IG slams not just the VA, but VHA facilities and veteran benefits like disability and education benefits as well. So we're going to take a look at an OIG report, and I'm actually going to ask Jason his thoughts on some information that I'm going to present. Then we're going to talk about the payments being delayed for FY24. So it's going to be the November 1st paycheck because the VA pays in arrears. So we'll talk about that whole debacle, and it's not going to be pretty at all. I can't wait. It's kind of like a WWE, you know. As I watch anything political, it's like watching WWE, but instead of being 8 years old, I'm in my 30s, and now we're talking about the country. So that's nice. Then we're going to talk about the cost of living adjustment. That's coming very, very soon. It will be final in about a month from today. And then, of course, looking at 2025, the biggest changes are going to be your mental health, sleep apnea, and tinnitus changes. So with that, Jason, I want to start it off with the VA OIG report. What I want to do is I'm going to pull it up here. This is the executive summary of the OIG report. I'm not going to read the whole thing. The plan here, though, is I'm gonna give you the summary. Then we're gonna look at the full report, and I'm gonna pick on something specific, and I want your thoughts. And I'm pretty sure everyone, this is Jason's first time seeing this, so we're gonna get some genuine first thoughts on this. I'll leave this link below in the pinned comments, but it talks about effective controls for public DBQs that you can download from the VA continue to pose a significant risk of fraud to the VA. This came out January 4th of this year. And Jason, real quick, 69% of about 32,000 claims, so 22,000 in total, had one or more fraud risk indicators. And so now the VA OIG is looking at public DBQs for fraud. And this is a key word here because indicators does not mean causation. It just means, hey, this looks like this is going on. And as you have different indicators flying, it can indicate, something else is going on. It can indicate this is going on. And so it's not a end all be all assessment, right? The VA OIG is just looking at saying, hey, here's what's going on. Now, when you click the full report, this thing is like 30, 40 pages. We're definitely not reading this. I'm going to go to page 28, Jason. And there's a lot of these indicators are really stupid, in my opinion. We're going to look at the indicators. And then there's one indicator that stands out above all the others. And that's what I want to speak about. So this paragraph, I'm on page 28. It's going to be right at the bottom of page 28, the second to last paragraph. The instances were provided because the review identified numerous claims with public questionnaires, that's the DBQs, with indicators of fraud risk, such as alteration. So that's one indicator. This is the one we're going to speak on. So alteration is one indicator. Contact information discrepancies, that's a second indicator. Examiner's address on the questionnaire was more than 100 miles. And the DBQ states that it was for an in-person exam, right? So the veteran traveled, that's a third indicator. Other evidence of record contradicted the findings of the questionnaire. That's 4. So, for instance, veteran evidence says A, the DBQ says B. And then lastly, the veteran refused to report for a VA examination. That's 5. I said lastly, but there's actually 6. And the assignment of 100% VA disability rating occurred without evidence of that condition. And so there's 6 indicators. Now, individually, I don't think these mean anything. But when you have DBQs that have multiple indicators, that's when the question mark at least starts. Now, focusing in on the alteration, and I'm about to kick you a question, Jason. This paragraph right here, going into page 29, it's scary, actually. I don't want to lead your thoughts. I think it's something to pay attention to. So the OIG identified 57 questionnaires representing over a quarter of the total. So let's just assume it's 200, right? So they had a sample size of 200. 57 of those completed during this review contain similar or identical language in questionnaires by different examiners for different veterans across multiple states.
All right.
One more thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
What the IG is implying, it says at least partly by an entity, and they use that word.
Yeah.
That's a specific.
I'm already there. Same page.
All right. So what the heck are your thoughts on different examiners, different veterans across multiple states that have the contain similar or identical language?
Yeah. Oh, it's easy, Clay. It's easy. The paid for service companies that coach you and help you are filling out DBQs because they can download them. They're filling them out with the exception of the provider's information section with the same canned information and sending them off to those organizations to have you complete your DBQ there. So there's doctors out there that are focused in on, hey, look, we'll help you with your DBQ, Nexus Letter, all that stuff. Right. And those doctors are looking for you as an individual to contact them, or they'll work with they don't care what, look, everybody wants to make money and everybody's lazy. So, they're not going to tell them no, right? They're not going to, oh, well, I'm not going to take it from you because you're going to send me hundreds of these. No, they're going to say, yes, send it. Oh, please. You've already done that. Wonderful. I'll read through it. Sounds good to me. And sign it. Move on. That's my thoughts on it, Clay. What are yours? Because now I'm curious.
It's one of those situations where the more you dig, the more you clean, the more dirt you're going to find, it just keeps getting bad. And I don't want to say all companies are doing this, but clearly out of a sample size of 200, if over a quarter of those had alteration indicators, that's something. And just to be clear, I'm not saying this. Jason's not saying this. This is the VAOIG. Right. It's based in evidence. I'm going to leave the link for the full report.
And here's the thing, Clay, is that, look, we're guessing, right? Yeah. We don't even know, right? And the OIG is not necessarily saying who it is, what the entity is. Just be careful is really the bottom line, right? I mean, the silver lining sometimes isn't worth the cloud, if you know what I mean. So another aspect here, Clay, because we are getting into this, and I've been a little bit concerned about this, and I've really tried not to talk about it because it's like, look, people do you, and that's cool. But I am almost at the point to where I'm starting to feel like there's more opportunities for people to be put into a bad situation, maybe not even intentionally, by others, right? So, for example, I'll kind of cut to the chase here. We're in a world now where it seems like everybody wants to push on information, and they're pushing on information based on, well, I did my own claim and I was successful. I'm going to teach you how to do your claim, right? And now you have those people out there doing that and then saying, hey, sign up for my extra special cozy services and I'll write your DBQ for you. And I'll
Mhm.
write, and I'll use the same thing that I did on mine. And then they do that 57 times for 57 different people that paid them whatever it is, $500. And they did that. And you could be put in that same position. So whether it's one of these big companies out there that's doing it, or some YouTuber with 300 subscribers who's saying that they're a guru, right? I don't even say I'm a guru. And I've probably the only one who's like accredited or who's been accredited with any sort of substantial amount of followers, right? I don't even say it. There's plenty that I still don't know, and I'm constantly finding out more. That's why I lean on Clay. So, so beware is all I'm saying, right? I feel like it's not going to get much better. It's going to get worse, and what's going to end up happening is we're going to lose. They took away, I don't know if you're aware, Clay, several years ago, probably, I don't know, man, 4 years ago or so, when you get my age, things blur a little bit.
4 years is yesterday. It's also 50 years ago. Who knows?
It was not today,
Yeah.
is all I remember. So about four years ago or so, the VA took away all of their public-facing DBQs off the website. Bam, gone. Nobody had access. All of us accredited individuals, whether it was service organizations or veteran service offices, whatever, were up in arms, like, oh, that's BS. And we fought hard and got them back. It's this type of stuff that's going to make them poof, disappear again. All right, back to you, Clay. Sorry, I had to get on my soapbox for a minute because I do feel like there's a potential bigger problem brewing.
Absolutely. So I think that was 2017-ish, 18-ish timeframe for the public-facing DBQs. But some things to consider here, and this is when it really takes a left turn, is okay, so whatever the tactics, techniques, and procedures for various companies, it could be, the veteran signs up with a company, the veterans or the company's, the entity, excuse me, the entity sends the veteran to the examiner sends the completed DBQ back to the entity, and all of a sudden now we have alterations happening saying, hey, that examiner gave you a 30%, but I'm gonna make your DBQ, I'm gonna alter your DBQ and make it say 70% or 50%. You say, well, why would they do that?
But clarify that, Clay. Clarify that, because they can't tell anybody make it 70%.
Yeah.
So explain how you're getting to that.
It's electronic, right? And so now you
Well,
have to look at symptoms.
it's the data, it's the information
Yeah.
in the DBQ, right? It's not
Correct.
make this veteran 50%. It's not that. They're not writing that in there.
Yeah, no.
So explain so people understand that that's not in a DBQ.
Yeah. So you're going through the DBQ, and it's the current diagnosis and then the symptoms that are going to correlate to whatever percentage it is. And it doesn't say 50%, but there is, like on the mental health DBQ, there's basically 0, 10, 30, 50, 70, and 100. Although it doesn't say those percentages, it says, occupational and social impairment, impaired at whatever level. And so it's very easy to make a DBQ appear to show a certain percentage. And understanding how the automated processing system works for the VA is that DBQ acts as like a Scantron, and it spits out a percentage for the VSR to go, hey, this percentage, one higher or one lower. And just knowing that, it's very easy to manipulate or alter those DBQs. Now, the reason I wanted to bring up this specific case is because Jason and I talked about it last week. I had mentioned a tiny change in the M21 TAC one that took about 6 months, and it was for this. So now providers are required to digitally sign. There's a bunch of signature requirements, and although it won't prevent fraudulent DBQs, it's going to make it more difficult. And the last thing I want to bring up on this, because the more I talk about it, the more worse it's going to get, Jason, is I'm not a lawyer. You're not a lawyer. So just food for thought. Everyone take this with a grain of salt. What happens if the VA has this data? They have the data now. They've made changes in the M21 TAC one to prevent more data like this from occurring. So the VA is tracking, the IG is tracking. Oh, by the way, the VA OIG reported this report to the House VA subcommittee about 2 months ago. So it's a big deal. It's not going to get swept under the rug. What happens if the VA or the Department of Justice really start going after this problem set? And I want to know who's at fault, right? Because when a veteran signs with a company
Mhm.
or you use a YouTuber's Nexus Letter template, okay, which doesn't exist, by the way, but people sell those. What happens to that veteran? Is the veteran at fault because it is their claim? Is the entity at fault? Is the examiner at fault? We'll call it fourth party examiner. I don't know. I think I could make a guess as to what's gonna happen. But it wouldn't be pretty at all. I want to hear your thoughts on what happens if the VA actually pursues this with some force.
I think that the person who's going to be on the hook the most will be the veteran, right?
Mhm.
So if a fraudulent claim, if it's fraudulent, right? So if it's fraudulent, it's fraudulent, and you could lose your rating, right? If it's a fraudulent situation, then there's a best case, worst case in that. I think that the VA could just go sever the rating, right? Fraud, sever rating. We're not going to figure out what you should have been. It's just we're going to sever it. What's your rating now? And then now you don't get paid for however long. That's your worst case scenario, I think. Your best case scenario is the VA actually goes, okay, based on all the other evidence, really you should have been rated at 30, not 70. And so we're going to reduce you from the 70 to the 30, and you're not going to get paid for however long.
Yeah, recoup that debt.
So I think that is probably in the scenario that you're giving, if they push forward and actually try to squeeze this into their limited bandwidth to go after everything. The other option is that they just go, okay, starting now, we're going to do X. They're probably going to spot check some more, and see what they're seeing and dig into the files a little more. And if that percentage of, whoa, this is like really a fraudulent thing, really spikes, then they may just be like, we got to just do a full audit and just get through all of these and figure it out. I personally had a DBQ that was typed, and doctor went back and went, oh, I wanted to add this, and just hand wrote.
Mm-hmm.
All the other information was fine. All of his information, all that stuff's fine, right? But that would be a red flag on this situation. Yep. Now, if that rating went away, I would still be at 100%. So I mean, whatever. I don't know how much they're going to look at the overall picture. I would think that if they start digging their heels into it, that they would actually look at the big picture. And for that example, they'd go, okay, well, they would still be 100. So even if we did anything, it wouldn't change anything. So move on to the next one, right? So as soon as they determine that nothing would change, they would just kick it to the side and move on, just for the sake of bandwidth issues, I think. Now, as far as the other parties are concerned, let's just pretend that it's a YouTube entity or a consulting company, right? Mm-hmm. So just some other entity that gave you this information or helped you along with it. My guess is for the bigger companies, you're signing some sort of contract that holds them harmless anyway, and saying that you need to read through and check, and you need to validate, and you need to make sure, and it's your claim, and you're the one filing it, and you're the one. So there's a lot of that. So I think that they're going to be safe from it. Now, from a legal standpoint, or not from a legal standpoint, from a legislative standpoint, you can go, okay, if I throw a pebble in the water, sure, it made one ring, but those other rings are from that same pebble. So we still need to address this issue, in a way that it relates with those types of companies. From the YouTuber standpoint, you're just sharing information. So I think that I gave this to you as an example, right? Yeah. Would be the argument. And I think that the provider who's doing it, there could be something. Look, you're a doctor, right? You're supposed to be held to a standard. You can't just have somebody hand you something and you say yes. Now, the doctors may lie, right, to save their own skin. No, I filled that out. Right? No, I addressed all of those things. That was me. Prove it wasn't. I'm not going to lose my license over this. And oh, by the way, I'll be checking from now on, is what they'll be thinking. But I don't see doctors readily just going, yeah, I wasn't being a doctor, and I was just, I'm willing to lose my license now. No, I think that they'll dig their heels in and say, oh no, I went through all of that and I agreed with all of it. And yep, whether they do or not, they're going to say they do. At the time, that's exactly how I felt. And I will die on that sword. If I was a doctor in that situation, you could bet I would be trying to really self-preserve. So that's kind of my thoughts on how some of that stuff roll out. I think that the biggest casualty in that would be the veteran, right?
Yeah.
And in some cases, unbeknownst to them, right? Like you might think, like a veteran, look, I can't figure out how to file my claim. I need help. Right? I've been denied. I'm doing something wrong. You know, I don't even know what the hell I'm doing. You know, oh, okay, do this, do that. Here's this. Here, let me file that. Okay. Cool. I got awarded. Sweet. Now all of a sudden, not so sweet. And it would sad, right? Because they would be kind of, you know, stuck in a hard spot, but they're not going to get to keep some sort of fraudulent rating.
Yeah.
So anyway, back to you, Clay.
Yeah, on that note, that's my biggest worry is how if the VA pursues this, because if they do, they can't. There is no in between. They have to either do it or don't do it.
Yeah, right. Do or don't.
And so now what concerns me is, okay, well, how do you prevent the collateral, right? And so, for instance, I think your scenario where your provider legitimately made a handwritten note, how do you prevent that collateral? That's going to be difficult. I don't know what that answer is. But it's going to occur. People who did not commit fraud are going to be tagged as if they did. Huge concern. That's my number one. Number two is I do think the veteran's going to be the most at risk and at fault. But I do think the veteran legally, and I'm saying this as a YouTuber, I'm in my basement right now, so I'm not a lawyer. Keep that in mind. I do think legally veterans who genuinely, you don't know what you don't know, even if you sign a contract, that contracts do not hold where there's a vulnerability or predatory practice, right? If I'm in a vulnerable state and that contract is taking advantage of me, there's a lot of ways to legally get around that. I don't know anything else than that, but that's at least a conversation I would have with a lawyer. And you can bet your bottom dollar a lot of these VA accredited attorneys would be representing veterans left and right if it came down to it. So that won't really, I'm not too concerned there. I'm more concerned about the collateral damage. I do think entities, if it decides go, you can't stop at veterans. You must go for the entities and you must go for the examiners. The examiners are kind of 50-50. I think entities, you have the federal, 38 CFR. Is it illegal? Is it not? Is it legal jujitsu? Is it not? Whatever. I'm not going to talk about that. I say it's not. I say it is illegal.
I was going to say.
Definitely. Yeah. And then you have the examiner.
Flip-flopper. In 2024, you said.
Yeah. And then you have the examiners where if you go after a doctor, that's a big deal. Doctors take care of other doctors for sure. And now you have this culture of saying, well, if it was altered, the examiner's not at fault. But then it's like, okay, well, look at the chain of custody of that DBQ. Is there responsibility on the provider to give it straight to the VA? And I don't think it is. I think it goes straight to the veteran, which then goes back to the veteran, right? Because now it's in the veteran's hands who's submitting that. So it's just the more you clean, the more dirt you're going to find. It's not going to be good if the VA pursues this. I think they are. And the number one reason I say that is because they would not have briefed it to the House Subcommittee of Veteran Affairs if it's just going to be swept under the rug. Okay. And that conversation happened about a month and a half ago. So this is still fresh. This is a ticking time bomb.
Right.
Go ahead.
So right now, I think that, so if it happened a month and a half ago, then they went on their summer break, right? Then they just went back into session, and now they're faced with this $3 billion shortfall for this fiscal year. It's there. It's just not focused on in the moment. I think I think what's going to happen is this is just going to give more weight for their efforts to really rein in the consultant companies, right? So it's the pebble in the water, yeah, the veteran, but and it's these rings too. And I think that the one caveat to going all in, right, either do or don't with moving forward with some sort of an action, is I think there's actually a do, a don't, or another do. I think that there's two do's. There's the do of all, just all of it, or there's the do of we identified that, whatever your example, right? Out of 200 spot checks, 57 were from an entity, right, or entities of the same cloth, right? And this gives us proof on this other aspect that they are actually helping veterans obtain claims, and in some cases, maybe fraudulently, right? Not 100%, because we're not looking into that, right? All the way, just potentially, it's a red flag, and this gives us another feather in the whatever feather in the sombrero, and another bullet in the quiver, whatever. Anyway,
Nice.
so you get what I'm saying. So it gives them more ammunition to try to push through legislation and get other legislators on board for that, right? Because just because you introduce something doesn't mean it's going to pass. You need a lot of folks agreeing with you. So I think that this could be a tool to help leverage that support.
Yeah, totally agree. And let's go ahead and move on. You did a segue. Last statement I'll say about that is this is American taxpayer dollars, and yes, Congress cares, okay? That's the last thing I'll say about that whole situation, especially if it's millions, probably $1 billion. If I had to give a guesstimate, probably $1 billion plus on fraudulent American taxpayer dollars going to whatever. You get what I'm saying. Okay. Next is the payment delays. And people get really, really upset on YouTube about this topic specifically, but it is a huge deal. And it's not myself or Jason saying your payments are going to be delayed. The VA secretary himself spoke about it many times. The VA press secretaries have spoke about the payments being delayed. Jason, can you give us an overview of this payment delaying that will occur if nothing gets passed? Our November 1st payment will be delayed. Can you speak about that?
Yeah. So, we've been talking about it a lot. I got chickens going on in the background. Sorry about that. So what we're looking at is you'll hear or you'll see or you'll read the $15 billion shortfall. Okay. That's actually two different shortfalls combined. One is on the VBA side, which is the benefits administration side. The other is on the healthcare side. So it's two different kind of, heads of that three-headed VA monster. So on the VHA side, that's the 12. That's really next year kind of a deal that they're working on, and who knows how that's going to pan out. On the other side is this $3 billion, and like Clay said, the VA secretary himself and others within the VA warn against, hey, look, if this funding, $3 billion, does not happen by September 20th, which is, days away. We, the VA, will not be able to send out payments for various compensation benefits. So, yes, your payment is at risk of being delayed. I mean, like Clay said, it's not. I'm not saying that. It's not some sort of weird scare tactic, right? Believe me, I care. I hope to God they get it passed. My call to action here to anybody who's watching this is contact your congressional office. There's two things that need to happen, and here's the problem. The number one thing, the goal here is to get the $3 billion so everybody gets paid, right? That's the goal. But there's a problem. Why are they $15 billion short? So there's efforts in place to identify that cause and try to put some sort of provisions in there to prevent it or check or whatever, so this type of stuff doesn't happen again. What happens when that happens is it creates more delays in passing legislation because you have all these different things in there. So it's almost, in my opinion, like you have two pieces of the legislation to fix the problem. You have the money piece, here's your 3 billion. Then you have the everything else piece of that legislation. We really need to focus on there's days. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
guessing this is going to be posted Monday the 16th, right?
Mhm.
So now I mean, we got days. So reach out to your congressional office, both on the House and the Senate side, because guess what? Not only does it have to pass the House side, it then needs to go over to the Senate side, then it
Yep.
needs to go to the president. So we don't have any time. Call your congressional office. If you don't want to call because you don't like talking to people, that's fine. Email your congressional office. If you don't like to email, but you don't like to talk to people, then call after hours. Call tonight, right? And leave a voicemail. If you're an in-person person, swing by their office. They got staff. The congressperson's not there, right? But their staffers are. You can go in there and have a conversation. Hey, look, this is what's going on. This is what I always say, Clay. When we think about it, we think about ourselves doing it. Imagine if there was 1,000 veterans and surviving spouses and
Mhm.
spouses and dependents who are 18 or over in a line going in to go talk to their congressman or woman's office, right?
Across
About
the
a
nation,
specific
yeah.
condition. Imagine that. You don't think that the congressperson's going to know that here's the thing. There's two things that I look at here. One is, yeah, we're addressing the issue at hand. Awesome. Do I think that Congress is going to I think it's going to be last minute. I think it's going to happen. I think they're going to fund the 3 billion. Okay? But does that mean don't act? No. It doesn't. You need to pretend like you don't think it's going to happen.
Mhm.
So that way you can go in with a little bit of fervor, right? And what this does is it shows your congressional member that you, as a veteran, as a spouse, as a surviving spouse, as a dependent, are paying attention. That is a scary constituency for that congressional member, because believe me, they pander to those paying attention.
Mhm.
You can pay attention or you can't, right? Or you don't. You do or you don't. And if you don't, then I mean, we get what we get. But if you do, we can actually get the things that we need and want. You, Clay.
Yeah, those who don't speak are most likely not going to vote, and those who speak most likely are going to vote. So they will pander to that. This right here, I want to share, not that tab. This tab right here, the VFW has a very simple action alert to avoid lapse in your VA benefits. There's a quick little link right here that you can follow as well. If you just Google VFW action alert, this will pop up because this is the biggest news as of today, and this is going to be posted on the 16th. And the last thing I want to say on that, or to continue that conversation, is the 3 billion is just for the VBA side of the house, which is what we're talking about specifically with payments. That includes disability and GI Bill, VRNE, basically any VA benefit you're getting is what we're talking about, not healthcare. Which is my point, right? What happens if the 3 billions pass, but not the lapse for the 12 billion in the VHA? I have no idea what that looks like. I assume there's like a emergency stash for VHA, but it would really suck to, for instance, I have a TBI clinic appointment next month, to have that delayed. It would suck for me, but I can get it rescheduled. But what about those who need that care specifically? That's why it's a big deal here. And to speak on politics, which I absolutely hate. I'm from Kentucky. Okay, we do not like any of that stuff. What I think is going to happen is each side of the aisle is going to point blame. So this side's going to say, "Hey, that administration," because it's a appointed position. That administration caused it. Blah 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 blah. We are the saviors who are going to pass this, and so you'll see articles in the House coming out. They've already came out over the weekend of House Republicans proposed bill for that, whatever. That's going to happen a lot. You're also going to see the opposite, where it's like Senate Dems or House Dems proposed bill to say this. And so I say that because each side is going to point blame. Each side is going to take credit. And none of that matters because it's the we're in the middle, just getting pulled left and right. And it's just absolutely insane to me that topics like this on veteran benefit payments, I can survive 1 month without my payment. I'm also in school, so I get a GI Bill and a disability payment. I can survive 1 month. Will it suck? Yes, but that's me. What about those who are paycheck to paycheck and that's their only source of income, and VA healthcare is their only source of healthcare? That could seriously put them in a bind. Not only they're going to be late paying their rent. Now there's late fees, late paying their credit card. Now there's late fees. And so
Mental health conditions.
yeah, it's insane. That's the importance of benefit payments being delayed. It must be passed by September 20th to go through the whole process up to the president. And if it's not, we will not be paid on November 1st. I mean, that's as simple as I can put it. And that's from the VA. The VA secretary has been kind of pointing the finger too. For instance, he just went to the American Legion's National Convention. I think this is the most recent article on this topic specifically. And pretty much what he said, paraphrase, he was like, hey, we've been telling Congress that we're short. They haven't done anything about it. They know we're short. It's in their hands now. And not to point blame at the VA secretary, but too little, too late. It's like, hey, it wasn't just a budget shortfall. Like, hey, I'm $10 short. Let me run to the ATM. It's a $15 billion budget shortfall. So something went wrong, seriously, on the budget and analysis side, which is not my expertise. I'm not a spreadsheet person. But for the secretary to point blame like that, I'm not really a big fan. We talked about, Jason and I talked about the bonuses that went out for the critical skill incentives. And pretty much what the secretary said was, I didn't know. Right. And it's just like, dude, that is a appointed, I don't know works for a specialist or a lance corporal, not the secretary of veteran affairs. But I don't know. It'll make me angry if I keep talking about it. So I'm going to kick it back to you, Jason.
Yeah, you know what? There's been too many calamities, too many big issue errors over the last 4 years. And look, not to be political, and I'm not, and I'm going to preface it with this, is that veterans issues are absolutely and should always be bipartisan, period. It doesn't matter who's in office. It doesn't matter who's appointed. I personally am a fan of, it would be nice if the secretary was a veteran. I mean, the current one is not a veteran, and is only second one, I believe, in history to hold this position as a non-veteran, which is fine. It doesn't mean that veterans are smarter and could manage it. I mean, if people are people, I get it. But there's been too many problems this past 4 years. I could rattle off all of the different technical issues, all the IT problems that they've had. Huge, lots of money, billions of dollars in IT issues. You had the intent to files at the beginning of the PACT Act couldn't get filed. Their system was kicking them out. System went down. You could not imagine that there was going to be a big influx of people coming and your system crashes. The unaccounted for reconciliation of Social Security versus pension payments and the overpayment to pension people. By the way, those receiving pension are probably the most vulnerable of all of us financially. And now you're going to rip money back from them. Probably the wrong move. The mortgage issue with the forbearance agreements through COVID, and then they ripped that program away while people were starting that process and actually got foreclosed on because the VA ripped that away with no sort of contingency plan. I have seen no contingency plans for anything. And in fact, the VA secretary actually, in this circumstance of the $15 billion, was actually asked, not exactly like this, but basically, do you have a contingency plan if you don't get the funding? Well, not at this time. We're pretty much just focused on getting the money. Well, that's what led to all your other effing problems.
Yeah.
I mean, because you don't have any contingency plans. Your leadership team, who I have zero trust in, has no contingency plans. And so what happens, right? I am not a fan. And, at the beginning, look, I give everybody, look, run, do it. You say a good thing. Awesome. But when it's 3, 4, 5, I think 5 or 6 now, huge, big deal issues, there's a problem. I think he should have. I think he should have been replaced, honestly. But here we are. So the $3 billion is the VA is just sitting there with their fingers crossed. He's already said that he's leaving. He's already out the door. And to blame Congress now when he had given them about a week's notice before their summer recess that they're actually short, which was a contradiction to the budget proposal that he submitted 2 months before that. Then comes 2 months later and says, oh, we're short. Oh, by the way, Congress is leaving. So wink, wink, nod, nod. I don't know if some of this was planned craziness or not, but it seems a bit interesting that we're this screwed up. All right. I know that we're pushing time limits now.
No, we are good. And I'm glad you brought up politics and the VA. And one thing I've noticed, and this is just an indication, okay, of all these big problems Jason and I and a lot of other YouTubers will cover, in every instance, literally every single one, the VA secretary and the press secretary, and basically any word that has the Department of Veteran Affairs label on it, they all say the same exact thing. And that's what pisses me off more than anything, because now we're looking at themes and listen, I was psychological operations in the Marine Corps. Yeah. This is my lane. Yeah. And I can see what they're doing. And they all say, talk to me about the $15 billion shortfall. Talk to me about fraudulent DBQs. Talk to me about how VA doctors won't do DBQs for veterans. Whatever problem it is, here's the response. This year, since the PACT Act, we've served over 1 million veterans. Veterans are getting more benefits than ever before, end quote. Okay. Yeah. Seriously, look at any problem set. Yep. You will see that quote in there. It will be buried in there. Yep. That's what pisses me off, because it is literally what we call a theme and message, which is how to politically go for the course, par on the course, if you will. And it just really makes me mad. That's the last thing I'll say about that, Jason, unless that brought anything up. No, it does, but I don't want to belabor this any longer. I'm sure that everybody agrees that, nobody likes any of this. Yeah. But hey, more veterans are getting more benefits than ever before. Everyone say hippie, yay. Okay. Now, looking at the cost of living adjustments that are coming, they will be final. It's usually like October, should be October 10th. 20th. Yeah. It's usually in that time frame. Jason, go ahead and talk about the cost of living adjustment, which are projections right now, but for the last, as far as I can remember, projections have been very, very close, especially when they're given in September. So what's it looking like for veterans right now? Well, what's funny is, Clay, that you mentioned that, because you have the Senior Citizens League that tracks this stuff and does projections all the time. And they get pretty close, especially when they're a few months out, unlike the VA with their budget. So, which is funny that, wow, people can actually figure this stuff out. Anyway, so over the course of the last 8 months, we have seen a rise in the projections into a fall. And we have been falling the last few months magically during the time period that is calculated for COLA, right? So for those that don't know, COLA is calculated using the last quarter of the fiscal year, the federal fiscal year, or the third quarter of the calendar year, which is July, August, September. So now we've gotten 2 months in the bank as far as data, CPIW, specifically that subset of data is used to calculate COLA. We're now in halfway through September, so the data is already halfway done. You can't go back and change it unless you're the government for COLA calculations.
Side note. So, but we're halfway through, jokes aside, we're halfway through September. And so we only got a couple more weeks, and then that data will be completed. And then in October, October 10th, the CPI-W data will come out, and Social Security will then calculate the full COLA. Right now, what we are anticipating as far as a projection or forecast is concerned is at 2.5%. So it's dropped from, I believe its high was in the low threes as far as projections.
Mm-hmm.
So we've dropped, a 0.5% or, maybe a 0.6, right? 5/8% or so. So we've dropped down, kind of substantially if you look at a percentage of that percentage, right? Which isn't good. This is what I've always say, Clay, and this is what rubs me kind of the wrong way. We can all agree that inflation overall does this, right? This is my fancy pop-up line of a graph.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there you go. And then that's inflation, right? Here's COLA. They're both trending upward, but there's a gap, and that gap just gets bigger and bigger over time. So you talk to somebody who's been receiving, or if you do receive Social Security and you've been receiving it for a substantial amount of time, 10, 15, 20 years or so, put something in the comments about how you've seen it just erode more and more and more over time. Because the spending power you had when you first started getting your Social Security 10, 15, 20 years ago is much different than it is today. I can guarantee it. So that's really bothersome. Now, there has been legislation, Clay, and I know you're aware of it, but I wanted to throw this out there and then see your thoughts on all of this. There has been legislation over the years that calls for a different indice within the CPI data, right? A different subset. And instead of using CPI-W, utilizing CPI-E. CPI-E is the Consumer Price Index for the elderly. And if you were to go back in time and take 20 years worth of adjustments, we would have realized on average a 0.25% or 25 basis point bump on every single year averaged out, right? One year might have been 3, the other might have been 1, right? So anyway, the average would have been a quarter per year in adjustments. And the Senior Citizens League has been a champion for that. Again, there's been legislation that calls for that utilization, both on the House and the Senate side. There's some pieces of legislation that just say, change it. There's one, I think the guy's name is Gallego, out of Arizona, congressman, who put one out and said, let's use CPI-E. It's going to give seniors, and they're always focused on Social Security, but by default, it's veterans too, right? Mm-hmm. So it's going to put more money in the seniors' pockets, blah, 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 blah. And oh, by the way, people who are hesitant to utilize CPI-E say, well, it's not always higher. Sometimes it's the same or lower. And so he put a provision in there in his legislation that says, utilize CPI-E unless CPI-W is higher. Then utilize CPI-W. Yay! Yeah. That's awesome. So then what that would do is that would actually take your 20-year average and bump that up from that 0.25% or so and make that even a little bit higher. So, it doesn't sound like much, but when you take a quarter and then you add another quarter and you add another and you add another, you're compounding interest in a way, right? In a increase sort of a way. So it's actually a great thing. So I'd much rather get a 0.25% on a higher number than a 0.25% on a lower number, right? Do that year over year over year, and it actually is helpful. So anyway, I'm going to kick it back to you because I can keep talking on and on about this because I hate it so much. So back to you, Clay.
That's not my, area of expertise, if you will, especially when we talk about math. But I will say this: I think it's math for Marines, right? Which I did complete for the record. But I think it's going to be difficult, and I'm not a political dude at all. However, I can tell you a lot of people, a lot of representatives in both areas are very focused on the deficit, and it's difficult because no party wants to take ownership of saying, hey, we're going to pay more. And that is a huge issue. That's way above my head. But that's my very first thought. It does suck to know that it is an increase, right? So for instance, I'm going to give you $2 extra, but you're going to give me $3. It's like, okay, well, are you really giving me $2 or am I just losing $1? That is the best way to explain cost of living and inflation, right? That's what
Oh, that's
happens.
awesome.
And so, you'll see, what is it, 37 right now for 100% VA disability. Although the number is more, it's actually your spending power is less than a few years ago. And so, yeah, we're getting an increase, but it's like, it's a backhanded increase, right? Anyways, that's cost of living in a nutshell, Jason. I'm glad you brought that up. And it really goes back to just politics, man, which honestly was not the plan for this episode, but it should be bipartisan. It's clearly not. I think veterans are used as pawns, as talking points, instead of saying, hey, we just had a 20+ year war somewhere, and that's just the last 20 years. That doesn't even include, right? Jason's era, your Shield Storm, your Panama veterans, your Vietnam era veterans. I mean, it's insane to me. Anyways, that's cost of living adjustment. I think it would be wrong if Jason and I had a 2025 changes video without talking about mental health, sleep apnea, and tinnitus. I'll go ahead and start this one off, Jason, then I'll kick it to you, and we can kind of end it here on the hour mark. But when it comes to 2025, no, it's not final. Yes, I would use April 1st as a planning factor. And before I go into it, what can you do right now? Do an intent to file, right? Worst case scenario, you do an intent to file, you don't use it, so what, right? How do you do an intent to file? Log on to va.gov, starting a claim. Are you active duty? No, right? Whatever the next question is, it's like, are you at risk of being homeless? No. Boom, your intent to file set right there. You can also use a rep. You can also call the VA. Super easy. You can mail one in too if you want to. That's fine. I just prefer VA online or va.gov, excuse me. But for those changes, mental health, man, I don't want to do a rabbit hole. I don't think mental health is that favorable. Jason does think it's favorable. We can talk about that real quick. Sleep apnea does not look favorable at all. I think it's going to suck. I have a fear about sleep apnea, and I'm going to say something, and I don't want it to be misinterpreted as like fear mongering. But when it comes to sleep apnea and VA ratings at the 5 and 10 year mark, so basically not 20, if your sleep apnea rating's at 50%, the thing that worries me with sleep apnea is it talks about if your CPAP works, this is paraphrased, it's going to be rated at 0%, right? So if you're able to wear your CPAP, you are no longer at risk of dying in your sleep, assuming that it's working. Boom, 50% to 0%. Now, CPAP machines through VA report back to the VA. And so my issue is at the 10-year rule, it talks about, this is also paraphrased, you need to have a lot of evidence. The VA just can't randomly do a routine future exam. There's got to be evidence. If the evidence states your CPAP is working, is that going to be a cause for the VA to re-examine your sleep apnea? Per M21 TAC 1 and 38 CFR, as I read it, I think that answer is yes. I think the VA is going to have a lot on their hands if they go that route. But I think legally they can do that based on that. It's not based on the rating criteria change. We know that's a no. The VA can't do that. It's based on reported medical evidence, which is different, right? And so that's my number one worry about sleep apnea. Seriously, I am genuinely concerned about that. Because it's not the rating change, it's the evidence.
So are you saying, Clay, so I get what you're saying. So I understand part. I just want some clarification. So what I understand and what I'm hearing is you are, for sleep apnea, consistently providing evidence regarding your condition to the VA. So there's this, it's just constantly going. So now you have two different veterans. I would love to hear an A-B scenario. Veteran A rated 50% because they have a CPAP. current rating schedule now where it rates you 50%. They're going through their life. It's sending back all the information, all that stuff. Rating schedule changes. Veteran B gets rated for sleep apnea, has a CPAP, and it's working, and they're rated 0%.
Mm-hmm.
All the data is being sent in. No matter what, they're held to their whatever rating schedule they were on, right?
Yep.
So veteran A doesn't have to worry that his CPAP's working because they're already rated on that schedule. Veteran B would only be favored potentially if it's not working. He's like, man, something's just not working. I'm really not sleeping well, whatever. I don't know. But the data is being sent. So they can leverage that data in order to potentially get an increase.
Increase. Correct.
Okay. So that's a good thing. Now, the worry that you have would be veteran C, who maybe gets a higher rating out the gate, but then VA starts to notice that, oh, your CPAP's working now. Now you're actually doing good now. And now they have all that evidence for a reduction. Is that the person you're talking about? Is veteran C?
Veteran A and veteran C, right? And so when a rating change happens, the VA cannot reduce you based on the schedule rating changes. Got it. So let's just call it April 1st, 2025 that goes into effect. Let's just call it that. Let's fast forward to 2029. You have 4 years of using the CPAP. Your evidence, you're not the 20-year rule mark. Your evidence states you now rate a lower rating. My concern is the VA going to classify that as a rating change? Because if they are, as a schedule rating change, if they are, then the answer is no, we're safe.
Right.
Is the VA going to say, well, your evidence states this over a 4-year period mark? I'm just using that as an arbitrary number.
Yeah.
What's the VA going to do? And as I interpret M21 and 38 CFR, I think they can change that because it's not based on the rating criteria change. It's based on evidence, on new evidence. For instance, if your mental health heals magically, you can be reduced. I don't care what happens, you can be reduced. It's the same thing as being healed, except for being healed means your treatment's working. That's my concern.
Yeah.
I really don't have the answer to that.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
as I interpret it, that's what comes.
Right.
I'm like, whoa, that's a flag. Like policy needs to dictate that.
Right. And I don't think so. I think that the veteran who got rated against whatever rating schedule that's the rating schedule that lives with them.
Mm-hmm.
So everything, if you change based on your rating schedule that you were rated against, then yes. So I don't know what's lower than maybe if you're not using your CPAP. If you stopped using your CPAP and on the current rating schedule, the VA would know that you're not using it, right? Because it would indicate that it's not being used. And then they could reduce you down for that. But I don't think that they can just arbitrarily pick which rating schedule they're going to rate you from if you were already rated on one, right? Because otherwise, somebody then the argument would then be you're rated for insomnia as a secondary, but insomnia as secondary has basically gone away. So because it's gone away, you should lose your rating. You see what I'm saying? Because now it's just gone. So they have to hold you accountable to the rating schedule in which you were rated against. They can't just pull the rug out from underneath you. So it's I think you're just grandfathered in forever. Unless you went for an increase.
Yeah.
Went over to a new rating schedule. Yeah. And then now you're on the new rating schedule and now you're screwed.
Yeah. If you prompt the VA, you're done. Hence the importance of the intent to file prior to April
right.
1st,
Yes.
1st being the thing. I was trying to find it really quick because we're about to end the episode here. But they're in the clause that states the VA cannot change your rating based on the schedule rating changes. There's a period. It's like a 3-sentence code. The last sentence, paraphrase, says something along the lines of medical evidence showing the condition got better. It doesn't say it like that. It says
Right.
something like that. And
Right.
that's my biggest concern. And what I want to bring up really is I think we've identified a gap in policy, and someone needs to give an answer prior to the changes going into effect. Because imagine 5 years from now, everyone with sleep apnea who's using CPAPs just go to 100%. Because their evidence states the CPAP's working, you're going to have a lot of mad veterans, right? And that's
Oh man.
And so that's
Oh,
a
yeah.
huge gap. That's a huge gap in policy. I just wanted to bring that up real quick.
Right. They need another
for
sentence on
2025.
there.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
need one more sentence that just says that evidence would be applied toward the active rating schedule that they were rated against, or not the active rating schedule, because that would imply the one current.
Yeah.
The rating schedule that was used to identify the veterans rating,
Mhm.
or whatever, right? Whatever the fancy words are for that. I agree. All right. So
That's all I
with
have
that,
on that.
Clay,
If you want to end it, yeah.
yeah. With that, we really appreciate each and every one of you for watching. Thank you so much. Have a great one. And remember, if we don't take care of each other, something went wrong.